Welcome to the All Things Real Estate Podcast with our very own Josh Barker. With more than 20 years of experience and over 5,000 properties sold, Josh brings a unique perspective to the real estate market. Let's get started.
Josh,
hey, what's
it's
up?
July.
Yes, it is.
And the oven is turned up.
Yeah.
You know, temperatures are rising.
Yes, they are.
The sucker grass is receding.
Yes,
yeah.
it is. Yep.
So all the people that moved here in the spring from places like the Bay Area, they're like, oh, I can handle the heat.
Looks like we live in the high desert.
Yeah, it's like, good luck with that. Find some shade. I bought a commercial grade ice machine years ago.
Oh, you did?
Which is getting fixed right now at the commercial grade ice machine place, and this is not its first time.
Do you mean like a cold plunge?
No, like an ice machine, like you'd go in a restaurant.
Oh, you actually have. Oh, do you have like the small pieces of ice?
No, the crushed ice.
That's really good, man.
I didn't, the cheap part, the frugal part of me went with the larger blocks, but I don't like conditioned air.
Yeah.
I know that's weird. It's 104. So what I do is my thing is I like a swamp cooler, which cuts out at a certain point. I just drink lots of ice drinks and keep the windows open, and much to my family's chagrin. And it's not because I'm cheap. It's not to save money on the utility bill. It's just that
Does she believe that?
It's the truth. It's the truth because I waste money in so many ways. Surely this couldn't be. But anyway, I digress. I'm getting off the rails here. So anyway, I was born in Lubbock, Texas. And it's hot, guys. It's July and it's hot. Before we started, there was a couple of things we were talking about. Like things are moving in the market.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you said that you're starting to see a rise in that is troubling are these subject to, and you talked about it. It was like over a year ago. It was starting to rear its head. Can you kind of like tell everybody what is subject to and why is it not necessarily a great path for people?
Yeah. I mean, what subject to basically means is like, imagine if you have a mortgage on your house. Let's just say you have a house that's worth $500,000, and so you have a mortgage on it for $475,000 or $500,000, and you want to sell it, and you tried to put it on the market, it's not selling, or you thought about selling it, and you found this option where somebody says, "Hey, well, deed me the property, and I'll just keep making your mortgage payment for you, so you don't have to worry about owning the house anymore." And we've seen that. In fact, what triggered that conversation with you is that I went on an appointment earlier this week. And this family had shared with me this experience where they had sold a home over in Mary Lake. And when they did, they sold the property subject to. So they deeded the property over to the investor. The investor is making the mortgage payment. And of course, they're still on the loan. So they still have an obligation for that loan. And so when they go to get financing in the future on another home, that mortgage is showing up. And, some of that liability, if you will, or exposure, is counting against them when it comes to financing for the next home. And so we had a conversation around it, and I kind of shared with them, the thoughts I had about it, which were, hey, first of all, share that it's important to understand that when you deed your property over to somebody, it's not like a lease option. When you deed your property over, you've lost control of that property. And those subject twos, what they're doing is that they'll have you deed them the property. They say they'll keep making the mortgage payment, and let's just assume they do. You're still obligated, though, for that loan for the length of the time they have it. And if they stop paying on it, that has an effect on your credit. And if you go to access credit, that can also have an effect on your ability to borrow in the future. And so my thought is talk to a legal professional. If you ever think about deeding your property to somebody without paying off the loan, talk to a legal professional immediately. It's a big deal. Don't do it without talking to a professional.
Yeah, that's I can understand people in these situations where they're stressed and they're like, I just don't want this payment anymore, and it seems like a lifeline, but it could be a buoy tied to an anchor.
Oh yeah, really, well you're not free. You're not free like you thought you were. And I've seen people do it with equity. And I'm like, man, this is just crazy that you would, again, relinquish your property and not have any control over it, but still be obligated to the loan. I mean, I can only speak for myself. I would never in a million years do a subject to, ever.
Yeah, no.
And where I really get frustrated is when I see real estate agents in the marketplace that advocate for investors like this, trying to find people who be willing to do this.
Yeah.
And they should know better too. So all I can say is when it comes to subject to, me personally would never in a million years touch one. If somebody was ever thinking about deeding their property to somebody else, talk to a legal professional before you do when it relates to the mortgage still staying on that property.
You know, it's funny you should say that, because this morning I had this thought. I can't remember why it popped in my head, but it was about the idea of professionalism. And I thought about how the word professionalism and how it can be used. I think what it was is I was thinking of my wardrobe for this podcast and how I may not look as professional as you, because that's a level of professionalism is your appearance, right? And I work on computers all day, and this is Joey dressed up. Right. This is my.
We're lucky you have a shirt on.
Yeah, this is business attire. Okay, and so then I thought about the professionalism of that. Somebody's saying, hey, they're a professional. They dress like a professional, or they're a professional. Like this agent really understands what they're doing. But they're a professional that's representing the opposing party, so to speak, almost like going into court and having two lawyers. And there's like a lack of moral professionalism.
There could be. And I do agree with you. I think that the public, right or wrong, has a perception that a real estate agent with a license has a higher fiduciary or is going to be,
should have a higher fiduciary duty.
Right. And should not be, making recommendations that are harmful, because there's podcasts that are going on right now, Joey, as we speak, that are talking about subject to and how great they are and how you can get all these properties and leverage all these assets with very little risk. And it's like, well, if there's little risk for you, that means it's high risk for somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that somebody goes into a situation like that with their eyes wide open, and this is where I come in on this. Get educated, know what the risks are that are involved, and then make a decision that you feel comfortable with. Mm-hmm. I'm not passing judgment on anybody that does one. I'm just simply saying it's not all roses.
Yeah.
And it could have a massive effect on what you thought your future might look like.
Something that you say all the time is to tell people, interview more than one agent.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important. You're even advocating for somebody that talked to you to go talk to another one of your professional peers.
I prefer it.
Which yeah, it's like absolutely go and get multiple opinions from professionals. I think put in that is make sure like the credentials of the professional, not just, hey, I sold homes. Okay, but how did you represent your clients well? Would your clients be happy with how you represented them? It's really, really important. These are the single biggest financial moves that the vast majority of people ever make. You know
what I mean? No, I think
far and away.
Yeah, it is. And I think people oftentimes don't take the time to interview multiple people. And it's like, look, if you were to go in and get a major back surgery because you're experiencing trauma or pain or something in your back and you want to get a surgery, I think most reasonable people would probably consult with a few doctors about what their options might be before they make a decision.
Yeah.
Right? And I think when you sell a home, it should be similar where, when you go to sell that property, and there's exceptions to that. If you already have a great agent with a great track record that's been really well versed in the market that you're confident in, I'm not passing judgment on that. I think I get that. What I'm saying, though, is that if you don't have that person that you have already been working with over the years that has demonstrated a high level of expertise, because they would probably offer sometimes recommendations to talk to people too, right? Mm-hmm. But if you don't have that person, I would say you absolutely should to interview more than one agent for the job. Compare the track record, compare the marketing plan, compare the strategy, and get a feel for whether or not you think this person is going to give you the most accurate information. Because when I work with people, what I often do is I'll try to educate them on where they're at in the market, what the options are that are available to them, what we would recommend, and then ultimately let them decide, what they want to do with all of that. And I think it's smart and well informed to do something like that.
Well, real estate it spans over so many different facets because it is marketing, but there's such a legal component to it, and there's such a huge financial component to it. And I think in real estate, a lot of people just see the marketing sales side of realtors. They go, well, he marketed my property. Okay, that started the whole process of escrow, whereas, it's this incredibly intricate, legally binding thing that can affect you your entire life, whether you're buying or selling, wherever you are. It's like, that's why I don't know when it happened. I've been in real estate quite a while, like just on the edge. You know what I mean? Like I practiced it for a little while, decided that wasn't really my forte. I'm more of the guy I work in the marketing realm of it. Yeah. But the rise of these teams, and I don't mean like you go to a brokerage and there's just a bunch of salespeople on staff. I'm talking about teams where they have a legal department. They have a legal expert, whether it's in-house or they have someone on retainer. Mm-hmm. They have experts that are just people who focus purely on managing the escrow. Yeah. Versus when I got into it, it was kind of like every realtor stood alone. Even if you were with a brokerage, I mean, you kind of had access to the broker, but you were this entity that was supposed to be an expert in 7 different fields. Right. And, jack of all trades, master of none, right? Yeah. And so, like in your office, I've seen your office, you have an incredible administrative staff where there's 1 or 2 people at each department that are experts in that field. And that's so important for, especially, in certain times, it doesn't matter. Like we go back 20 years and I mean, homes were priced a lot less. Financing was easier. Life was simpler 25 years ago. Sure. When I bought my first house like 27 years ago, life was a lot simpler. We live in an incredible time full of a lot of awesome stuff, but with it comes a lot of intricacy. Sure. And you, just like you said with the back surgeon, like, man, go and interview, get different opinions. Yeah. You know what I mean? Don't be that cautionary tale. To do a little due diligence on the front end. Sure. And don't become the cautionary tale on the back end. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And you're right, the industry has changed a lot. I mean, the legal side of it has, when I started 25 plus years ago, I think we probably had a half a dozen pages to a contract, and now it's probably 40 pages. Disclosures were 3 or 4 pages, and now they're probably closer to 40 or 50 pages. Yeah. The amount of legal liability that's assumed by a property owner, and really a buyer too. In some cases, it's a big deal. And understanding how to navigate those issues. And I'm not talking about just purchase contracts. This morning I had a meeting with our team, and we were talking about easements and building setbacks and deed restrictions, and there's a ton of stuff that it goes way beyond what most people realize, and you don't realize how much you need it until you need it. Yeah. Jump out of an airplane, you go, "Where's my parachute?" Well, that was the wrong time to ask. Yeah. So, kind of leading into that is that we were talking about how the fallout rate is going up. And I think that's probably reflective of, I think it is a good segue to talk about the fallout rate, which, escrows that get open then fall out of escrow. Yeah, that rate's going up. Yeah, it's bad. I don't know if I even told you this, but the fallout rate in the market right now is climbing over 30%, meaning that for every 10 properties that go into contract or go into escrow in the entire market, over 30% are falling out. Yeah, over 3 or more are falling out. Yeah. What are you seeing? Is there like one specific thing that you're like, oh, this is the common reason they're all falling out? We looked into that. I looked into it internally into our company because we're still trending in the low 20s, 20% fallout rate. So we're experiencing it. And then I've also talked to some other brokers, owners of companies also, because they obviously have agents that work for them. And I'm trying to figure out what they're seeing. And what we've kind of narrowed it down to is 2 things. One is appraisal, and I'll explain in a minute why. And then the other one is the condition of the property. So when it comes to appraisal, what's happening right now is that the appraisal industry is getting a lot of pressure put on them to start integrating AI into their reports. But the problem with AI is that AI is really going to be using black and white scenarios in order to arrive at a value. And that discretionary piece that a human brings to the equation is not necessarily being exercised by AI right now. So, for us to have a really experienced appraiser in town that goes out and looks at a property and goes, okay, well, I'm going to use this area for comps. I'm going to use this area over here for comps. I'm going to use this third area for comps because I know the buyer for all those 3 areas would consider all 3 areas, right? Yeah. That's something that an appraiser can do, but I'm not convinced AI can. Mm-hmm. They can evaluate the quality of the appliances compared from one house to the next, or the type of construction or the age of the roof. These are all important factors. Huge. And I don't think that AI is doing that at the same level. So as a result, you're going to see appraisals failing. The other one that's happening is that the condition of the property and that comes down to agents, actually. There's a lot of
conversation that should be taking place between a buying agent and a selling agent in terms of setting proper expectations for both clients, both for the seller and for the buyer, so that fewer of these things fall out like they do now. A little bit of what they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah.
And I think educating people in advance, like I'll give you an example. I have a seller, that would say, hey, we got an offer on your home. This is what it is. And I would share with them, like, if I know the roof is going to likely get called out, I'm like, hey, friendly reminder, we're negotiating this contract right now on face value, but be prepared. It's highly likely that after the buyer's investigation that the roof will likely be called as something that needs to be addressed, and be prepared for that. So that way, when you're at that stage in the contract, it's not a shock to you. You've mentally prepared for that. You may have actually negotiated your contract with that in mind. So that way, it's something that you could be working with the buyer to make sure you guys can get to a successful close. That's education.
I have a friend who's a roofing contractor, and he gets called in all the time, and that is actually a big factor.
Yeah.
In negotiation, because they look at the house, and then a home inspector comes in, and will often say, like, hey, you need to get a roofing contractor to look at the roof.
Sure.
Or there's a few common, landscaping is nice, but it's cosmetic. If the grass, it's like, okay, but a roof is not cosmetic.
Yep.
There's a portion of that's cosmetic. Hey, that's a good looking roof. Wow, your roof looks awful. But it's, hey, if it's leaking, this is gonna be a major problem.
Oh yeah.
And so he gets called in a lot. That's a big portion of his business, is just realtors calling him in saying, hey, can I get a roof inspection? And deals fall out a lot because a roof that looked like it had 10 plus years of life on it, and he says, no, that I would have replaced it last year.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 years.
Sure.
You've got issues now that if all we just need is one really good winter.
Yeah.
And you're going to have, if we had Snowmageddon again, you're in deep trouble if we have Snowmageddon again. So it's, and then insurance companies are like, no, you have to get a new roof. We're not going to touch the house.
Well, and that's triggering it too. I mean, I should say that insurance is related to the inspection.
Yeah.
Because insurance is a piece of that. So I would say roofs are probably close to being the number one related to inspections that cause problems. Decks, fire insurance, and fire insurance is related to the topography around the property and those types of things, that are popping up. So that's part of that inspection process. So. And again, those things can be managed. You can set expectations in advance. You can make sure that when you receive an offer on a property from a buying agent, did you guys have a conversation around insurance? Because if they're going to have sticker shock, why don't you have it now before you go into contract, instead of when you have the seller take the house off the market for 3 weeks? So there's a lot of work, and that's where, again, goes back to that interview more than one agent. I mean, people that have done this for a long time and are selling at a higher number on a regular basis, they've experienced enough of these problems, and they've already solved them enough times that they know how to prevent them also.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that just can't be overlooked.
In jiu-jitsu, we say drillers make killers, and drilling is doing all that monotonous stuff.
Yep.
It's not the fun stuff. And so when you're talking about real estate, somebody who has touched a lot of transactions, not just in the past, but is touching a lot of transactions now.
Yep.
That's the equivalent of drilling. They're like, hey, this is where the market is right now. Insurance is an issue. I know it wasn't 5 years ago. Insurance wasn't really an issue. It's a major factor right now.
It's a factor in the listing appointment when you're talking about value. It's a factor when you're on the market and people are starting writing offers on it. It's a factor to get across the finish line. I mean, it's showing up in 3 different times.
What about like pricing? Because one of the things that pops in my head that I think about is, the seller, they obviously want the most money out of it. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's all of us, duh.
Sure.
But being realistic and saying, hey, look, I know you think it's worth this, but if the banks won't appraise it at that, then how many buyers can come in and pay over appraisal value?
Yeah.
Or how long is your property going to sit when you go to market at price X, and so somebody comes and looks at it, and they're looking at several other properties at price X and saying, I'm seeing way more value at the other house. Yeah. But I went with the agent that told me retail plus 10%. And I like that. I was like, retail plus 10%? Are you kidding me?
Well, I don't mind that comment too much, because if they were to actually even identify retail, That'd be an improvement.
Yeah.
And then add 10%. Well, at least you knew what the number was you started with.
Yeah.
Where I'm more concerned is when people walk into an appointment and they say, well, how much do you want for the property without giving that consultation?
Yeah.
Because that's where you really put yourself in a bad position as a seller, is not having that experience or that education before you go in. I don't have any reservation with a client testing the market. However, I think it's important that they understand that that's what they're doing and that there's a cost to that. Mm-hmm. Days on market, perceived value from the eyes of the buyer, price reductions, things like that are sometimes the consequence of overpricing too much, right?
Yeah, there's a weird psychological game going on because I've heard it many times where somebody takes their property to market and they get, multiple buyers and they sell it, or they get into escrow and they go, oh, man, I knew I should have asked for more. It's like, what? You got, the numbers overwhelmingly show you got retail plus.
Right.
Yeah, but I didn't sit on the market for 4 months, so I could have gotten retail plus. And you're like, no, you could have sat a long time and then got retail minus because the psychological effect of, we know this is an unwritten rule. When a buyer's agent is sitting down and they're going to make an offer and a property's been on the market a day versus the property's been on the market 91 days, that's a psychological thing on, okay, how are we going to make our offer?
Right.
It just is.
Yeah.
We've talked about that where you said you go to a car lot and there's 3 cars versus 300. The buyer has a completely different psychological approach. It's scarcity. It's supply and demand.
That's right. Yep.
And that comes into real estate. And so I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll let you answer this. Is like, do you have some lines where you say, hey, look, let's test the market, but on day X, if we haven't got offers, if we're not showing the property, we need to reevaluate?
I don't know if I would necessarily say it like that. I think when I go out to meet with a property owner, what I try to do is identify where the current market value is looking backwards over a short period of time, to determine what's happened recently in the past, and then comparing it to what's currently on the market now active for sale, because that's your competition while you're on the market. Mm-hmm. And so we try to identify a number there, and I try to be on the record for that being a possible outcome. Because I think, it's the number one reason I get hired. I tell the truth. It's the number one reason I don't get hired. I tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And for me, I want to be on the record for a number that I believe that the market can bear at that moment. Now, strategy is the market appreciating currently in the market? Is the market going down currently? Is the market flat? Do we think interest rates are going up? Do we think interest rates are going down, or we think they're going to remain flat? And those are factors that give you an idea of whether or not you can test the market and how much you can test it by. Mm-hmm. So let's just say that a seller prices their home 5% above what that number is. Okay, no problem. But when you go to the market, test the market, pay attention to the amount of activity you're getting in that first 7 to 10 days, follow up on all the showings you received. Did they buy another home? If they did, why? What did they think about your price? That way you have enough information to make an informed decision of, is it time to change the price?
Yeah.
And I think it's that proactive approach that protects you from the perceived notion from a buyer that your home's got something wrong with it. So I've been asked for years, is price reductions a bad thing? And I would answer and say, on its face value, no. But that applied with days on market, maybe. So for example, price reductions in the beginning of a listing period are perceived by the market as motivation. Buyers see it. They see the price reduced already. In 2 weeks, you drop the price. What does that tell the people about that seller?
They want to sell the house.
They want to sell the house. They're motivated. Now, if you don't do anything with your price and you leave it and you just stay on the market for months, if a buyer sees a house on the market for 90, 120 days, what do you think they're thinking about the house now?
Something's wrong with that house.
Something's wrong with the house. And so that's where the two different processes are. So for me, I'm always focused on, let's try the best we can to make sure we sell the property within a reasonable amount of time. And if somebody says, well, how do you know what that is? What are the other homes like yours selling for, and how long on average? That will give you what's reasonable.
And in there, you said, what's the market doing? And my mind immediately said, what is the segment that you're in market doing? Because if somebody calls you today and says, hey, I have a house that I think's worth $350,000 versus I have a house that's worth $750,000, those are two
answers.
Very different segments.
Very
different segments.
Very different answers.
Completely two different stocks in the stock market.
Yep.
You know what I mean? What's the stock market doing? Because I'm thinking about buying stock X or stock Y. It's like, let's look at stock X and stock Y on their own merits.
That's right.
And their industry.
That's right.
Right? Like,
yep.
This is tech, this is medical, and what are their financials? Yeah, that's why I say that it's way more intricate than everyone just thinks it's the sales. Everyone thinks it's the marketing piece, which is a huge component. But there's so much more going on.
Positioning in the market. Because marketing is pretty transparent now. When you list your property on the multiple listing service, it's going to Zillow, it's going to Realtor.com, it's going to 1,000 other websites. Buyers are getting access to them almost in immediate time. So they understand. If you're in the market for a home at $400,000, believe me, you're probably the most educated person on the planet for homes around $400,000. Mm-hmm. And I would put you up against any agent in the marketplace, and you probably know as much as they do.
Yeah.
Because you're focused on one price segment. Mm-hmm. And I think with us as agents, what we need to do is when we go in to meet with a property owner, same thing. You get focused on that price segment. Determine where the market is in that price segment. Educate the customer on where it's at because they need to understand it.
Yeah.
So that they can make good decisions when it's time. And
they can set realistic expectations because that's the big thing.
Yeah.
So much of our outcome psychologically is the expectations that we walked into it. If you thought your home was worth $450 and the market was trying to tell you it was $400, you're going to be unhappy. If you thought your home was worth $350 and the market's telling you it's worth $400, you're going to be very, very happy. Yeah. In both those instances, the market was saying your home's worth $400, but your expectations were widely, way different.
And I'm not seeing it as much. I mean, I'm still going on a couple of listing appointments a day, so I'm still really active in the market. And I can tell you that this last 4 or 5 years, I think I'm enjoying talking with property owners that are way more educated than they ever have been before. I mean, the Zestimate that Zillow came out with years ago, not that it's any good, but it is a data point. You know what I mean? Somewhere, a starting point. But because sellers now have the opportunity to go online and look and see what other properties are selling for, they can tell whether or not they're selling too. They know if a house has been sitting there for 3 weeks, it hasn't sold. They know there's something wrong there, right?
Yeah.
So you're working with a customer in many cases now, from my experience, that's a lot more educated than they have been in the past. And where that becomes more valuable is when they know and it's easier then to make recommendations, have a collaboration, a clarifying conversation around price, and get it listed. You know what I mean? Where 15 years ago, I could be like you said, I could go on an appointment knowing it's worth $300, and the customer might have thought it was $400 because the market was $400 a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And that we're thinking about the market when it went down at that point, but that was a tough conversation. I had to take somebody from $400,000 to $300,000 in an hour.
Yikes.
That wasn't a happy conversation, right? So when you're going in and you're talking with a person, I don't feel like that is the challenge. I mean, there might be a difference in opinion on value, but it's not a 25% difference in perception.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Josh, thank you. Appreciate all of this, man. I hope anybody that's thinking about buying or selling and they have any questions, will reach out to you and your team.
Sure.
And try to stay cool out there. Find shade. Commercial grade ice machine sounds nice, but wait until you get the maintenance bills on it. I don't know if my frugality is paying off.
Well, I know where I'm going this afternoon. I'm going to be over at the Garten family.
There you go. The ice machines at a refrigeration place right now getting fixed. So
there you go.
I'll call you when it's ready.
Let me know.
Thanks a lot, Josh. I'll see you in August.
All right. Thank you too.
Bye.
Bye.
If you're enjoying the All Things Real Estate podcast, please feel free to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.